My interest in what all of this we're going to see tonight is started way back during the Vietnam War. I was a young lieutenant in the United States Army. I had been to field artillery school and jungle warfare training. I had orders to a small fire base in the Central Highlands of Vietnam. I'm getting ready to leave, and about a week before I'm supposed to fly to Son Sut Air Force Base in Saigon, I get a call from the Pentagon. I got this colonel on the other end of the line. He's with the Personnel Division, and he says to me, "Lieutenant McMahon, do you have any interest in being reassigned to Germany?" And I'm like, "Oh, okay, yeah." Let me think about that. I said, "Yeah, Germany sounds very exciting. I would love to go to Germany." And I was one of the very lucky few. I was sent to Heidelberg, West Germany, which was the headquarters for the U.S. military in Europe, and also one of the most beautiful small cities on the planet Earth. I was assigned as an aide to a United States general, and then spent the next 2 years of my life traveling all over Europe in a helicopter with that general. And that experience completely changed my life. But I didn't realize how much it would change my life until I flew home to Birmingham, Alabama, where I grew up, and I got out of the airplane and drove home, and for the first time ever, I saw the American landscape with a completely different set of eyes. Because, ladies and gentlemen, to travel is to learn. And that's what we're going to try to do tonight, is to share with you a few of the things that I've learned in 40 years in working with towns in every American state, all over the state of Maryland. A lot of things. So we're going to go fast from there. And just hope you can, the computer has kind of messed up and it's changed the format. I don't even know on my slide, so I don't know how they'll do, but let's just go ahead and see. All right, so I think you wouldn't be here tonight if you didn't think Frederick was a pretty special place, right? Obviously you wouldn't be involved in organizations like you just heard about if you didn't think it was a special place. But the problem is that there is no place in the world today that's going to stay special by accident. And that is true not just in America, but that is true all over the world. And you say, well, why is that? And the reason is because the world is changing faster than ever. You say, well, what's changing? And the answer to that is everything is changing. I mean, the economy, technology, demographics, consumer attitudes, travel and tourism, energy, the weather is changing. And you basically have very little to no control over those things, but you do have some control of how you respond to those things. And I understand that there's a lot of people, particularly in small towns and rural areas, who don't like change. They say, I don't really want things to change. But the truth is, there's only two kinds of change in the world we live in today. There is planned change and there is unplanned change. I mean, the question for you in Frederick County is not whether you are going to grow and change. You're going to. The real question is how. How? And I want to tell you that progress does not demand degraded surroundings. Frederick County, Maryland can grow without losing and destroying the places and things that people love. And that's, I'm sure, what has brought you here tonight. Abraham Lincoln, I think he summed it up pretty well. He said the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. So congratulations, Frederick County, on having a new comprehensive plan, which is indeed a vision for how you're going to grow in the future. Growth, and I wish that was focused a little better, and I'm not sure how to do that, but growth is all about choices. Choices. You know, should you be investing downtown or should you be investing out on the highway? Should we be designing around people or should we be designing around cars? And, you know, should we be encouraging infill development and redevelopment or should we be encouraging greenfield development and sprawl? Those are some of our choices. Growth is also about that. That's my grandson, my son, Sean. He's 41 years old now, but I like this picture because it reminds me of what we're all here about. It's about our children, our grandchildren, about the future, and about preparing for the future. Growth is also about balance and harmony. It's about the relationship between jobs and the environment, conservation and economic development, you know, people and the land. It's about trying to find the right balance. It's also, I believe, about finding win-win solutions to the problems that face us in America today. I'm one of those people who think we spend way too much time in America fighting about what we disagree about and not nearly enough time sitting down community by community to talk about what we do agree about. Right. And when you actually do that, you find there's a lot of things we agree about, particularly about the place that you live. And I can tell you, having spent 40 years working with communities around the country, that I have found that most people care much more about the place they live than the political party they belong to. And you can reach consensus about the place if you simply sit down and talk about that. So what else is about choices? Economic development is about choices. You know, should we always be trying to go after that one big thing, or we should be trying to grow the existing businesses we have? And by the way, did you know that 65% of all new jobs in America grow out of existing businesses, not from new businesses? So let's think about the old model. So when I was growing up in Alabama, you know, our economic development plan was all about cheap land and cheap labor and low-cost positioning. And, you know, our rural economic development plan was let's just widen all the highways. And we lined the highways with a bunch of junk. We called that economic development. But I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the model has completely changed. It is no longer about shotgun recruitment. It's about laser recruitment. It's no longer about low-cost positioning. It's about high-value positioning. It's not about cheap labor. It's about highly trained talent. It's not about what you don't have. It's about what you do have here in Frederick County. And I want to tell you, in a world where capital is footloose, quality of life is critically important to our economic well-being. And I want to tell you, smart people, and I'll talk some more about this in a second, smart people love great places. And so creating a great place is really a key to your economic development future. And I want to say one other thing. You know, the chief infrastructure investment today is no longer roads. It is education. Education, which somehow disappeared off the bottom of the screen here. But anyway, we are now in a global competition to attract and retain talented workers. And what we're finding, you know, when I graduated from college, we had these recruiters would come and they'd interview you, and you just moved wherever you get a job. Young people today figure out where they want to live, and then they move there, and then they look for a job. I'll never forget, yet just a couple weeks ago, I was on Frontier Airlines flying out west. I'm reading an ad for Bend, Oregon. It was an economic development ad. The airline magazines are always filled with them. It did not say one word about low taxes or regulatory relief. You know what it talked about? It talked about their 110 miles of bike trails. It talked about the fact that you could go fly fishing in the morning and snow skiing in the afternoon. It talked about their walkable downtown. That was the kind of thing that they were talking about in one of the fastest growing cities in the West. Ladies and gentlemen, place matters. New investment is increasingly seeking locations based on the quality of place rather than the utility of a location. It used to be about railroad junctions or riverfronts or interstate interchanges. Everybody has an interstate interchange now, but it's the great places that people really want to move to. So here's a study that was done by a group called the Sonoran Institute. Interviewed 1,000 business owners in 5 Rocky Mountain states. They asked them this question. They said, if you had a choice, would you rather live in the ideal community with a lower salary or a less than ideal community with a higher salary? 83% of all those surveyed said the ideal community was more important than the salary. Place matters. You know, another thing we found out is that successful communities are distinctive communities. So what's the fastest growing city in America? Austin, Texas. What is their slogan? Keep Austin weird. Now, they don't think it's just a funny slogan, which it is, but they think it's an economic development imperative. And what they mean is keep us on the cutting edge, keep us unusual, keep us unique, save our soul, the soul of that place. In fact, the World Bank has a new publication out on the economics of uniqueness. And they go on for 200 pages to talk about all the reasons why sameness is a minus in the world we live in. It is not a plus. In other words, the more Frederick County comes to look just like every place else in America, the less reason there is to invest here, vacation here, retire here, whatever. So, you know, just think about the synonyms of the word, the meaning of the word itself. You want to be cool, extraordinary, unique, different, or you want to be just like everybody else? So, you know, I could go on and on with this idea of the distinctive community. You know, Mark Twain, he sums it up pretty well. He said, we take stock of a city like we take stock of a man. The clothes or appearance are the externals by which we judge. Let's talk about a community's front door for a second. Its gateway. And just like with meeting a person, a good first impression is important and a bad first impression is hard to change. You think you would rather visit the town of Franklin, Tennessee, or would you rather go to the town of Midfield, Alabama? Which one looks more like a community with a sense of pride and a sense of place? Which one looks more like a community that you would rather invest time or money in? If you don't remember anything else I say tonight, remember this. The image of a community is fundamentally important to its economic well-being. And what I mean when I say that is every single day in America, people make decisions about where to live, where to vacation, where to retire, where to invest based on what our communities look like. Let's talk about tourism. I don't know if you can see this. This is the official travel guide for the state of Oregon. The slogan is, Oregon, things look different here. Can you imagine something that said, Maryland, things look the same here? Well, of course, who'd want to come? What is tourism? Tourism, by its very definition, is visiting places that are different, unusual, and unique. So the more any town in Frederick County comes to look just like every place else, the less reason there is to visit. But it also goes well beyond tourism. In the old economy, it was all about markets, but once again, today, it's all about places. Even the National Association of Home Builders now says the place has become more important than the product. So what do the home builders mean when they say that? What they mean is, of course, that what is going on outside of a house has far more impact on the value of a house than what's going on inside of a house. Put another way, the character of the neighborhood will impact your value far more than whether you have granite countertops, for example. Why do you think for many of you could buy a beautiful Victorian house in Detroit for $20,000? It's all about what's going on in the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. Mick Cornett, who's the Republican mayor of Oklahoma City, I think he sums it up pretty well. He says economic development today is really the result of creating places that people want to be. Creating places that people want to be. So I want to just wrap up this part by just talking about this study that the Knight Foundation, which grew out of the Knight-Ritter newspaper chain, did a couple of years ago called the Soul of the Community Study. They found that communities with the strongest attachment to place also had the strongest economies. And then they said, well, what is it that attaches people to place? And they came up with three things. One was social offerings, places like parks or libraries or recreation centers. In other words, a place to meet and mix with your neighbors. They also found it was how welcoming a community was to newcomers. I was at a city I won't tell you the name of a year or two ago, and somebody said, we're very welcoming to people who aren't different. And I want to suggest to you that the successful communities of the future will be the communities that are welcoming to everyone, not just the people who are not different. And then they said the last thing on the list was, what does community look like? It's aesthetics, it's green space, it's physical beauty. And a lot of times people are saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. But let me just give you a little different perspective on that. I have a friend who's former dean at the University of Michigan. He used to say, if a building, a landscape, or a city is not beautiful, it will not be loved. If it is not loved, it won't be maintained. If it's not maintained, in short, it won't be sustained. You hear this term sustainable development, which is what my field is, and I talk a lot about energy efficiency and green buildings and things like that, but if you actually look up the definition of the word sustainable in the dictionary, it will tell you it means enduring. Enduring. A sustainable community is a place of enduring value. So, and then let me just show you this. So, it's a little hard to read here, but this is from the National Association of Real Estate Appraisers, and what they say is you can put a dollar value on a view. Scenic landscapes are an economic asset, not just because you and I think they're nice, but because other people are willing to pay to see the view and to experience the unique character of a place. They go on to say, quote, housing, hotels, offices with scenic views always command premium prices. The better the view, the higher the price. Now think about this. You just go to the beach in the summer. Say you go to Ocean City. You're going to pay more for a room with a view of the ocean than the room on the other side of the hotel. What are you paying for? You're paying for the view. And I want to suggest to you the scenic landscapes of this county have quantifiable economic value, which is just one of the reasons why these beautiful landscapes are worth preserving. All right, I want to touch on three things. All right, you've heard about all these things. The problem, once again, is not development. The problem is patterns of development. What do I mean by that? Three things. Where do you put it? How do you arrange it? What does it look like? Where do you put it? How do you arrange it? What does it look like? Some places are better for development than other places. Houston, Texas is learning that you shouldn't be developing the floodplain after they had 3 500-year storms in 5 years, just as an example, okay? Steep slopes, not a great place. This is Dolphin Island, Alabama, in South Alabama. I worked a lot after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans and in South Alabama. And I'll tell you something funny about those houses, guess what? They're all gone. Because building out in front of the dune line at the beach was really not the smartest thing in the world to do. But you know, then we did things like this. This is Antietam, of course, the site of the bloodiest single day in the history of the United States. We had 23,000 Americans died here, fell here on a September afternoon in 1862. But in 1990, this was voted the single most endangered historic place in the United States. It's off that list today, thanks to a lot of hard work by lots of people like Jim Lighthizer and Pat Noonan and some other people that you may know. But it's, you know, one of these beautiful protected places. What was in danger of? Well, let's go down, get an airplane, we'll fly 100 miles to the south to Spotsylvania County, Virginia. So this is where the site of another great battle in the Civil War, the Battle of Chancellorsville. This is the Salem Church, which was one of the most important features in the fighting at Chancellorsville. And the fighting waged all around this church. And after the battle was a hospital for both Union and Southern wounded. The church is a National Historic Landmark, but it's also a classic example of saving a structure and losing a place. So I ask you, what's wrong with this picture? I would suggest to you simply this. There are better places in America to put a strip shopping center than in the middle of our hallowed ground. And I can tell you that the county supervisors of Spotsylvania County now, they get this. If they simply moved the shopping center 1,000 yards down the road, they could have had the tourist dollars of the millions of Americans who are interested in historic sites and places, as well as the economic development value of a shopping center. So some places are better. So think about here in the county. So should you be putting, you know, development in existing towns, like maybe in Brunswick or in Thurmont or Emmitsburg or in Frederick, or should you put them out on the forest land or in the ag land or historic sites? So that's really what we're talking about when we think about where we put development. And I want to suggest to you that every community needs a long-range conservation plan, just like you need a long-range transportation plan. And the truth is, if you don't have a long-range conservation plan, you need to be thinking about not just where you develop, but where you don't develop. And when that doesn't happen, people get mad, and they think that everything is up for grabs, and then they want to slam the brakes on everything. And we saw that happen here in this state in a lot of places before the recession. So, you know, this is what Montgomery County did years ago. And of course, you know, just think about it. Just fly into Dulles sometime and look out the window of the airplane and see what that decision that they made 50 years ago about the ag preserve has done. I mean, Montgomery County is a long way from perfect, and you don't want to be like Montgomery County in many ways. I'm sure you wouldn't be living up here if you wanted to live in Montgomery County. But at least they've done this, right? And they set up the first transfer of development rights program in the United States. They started buying development rights. They passed bonds of $200 million to buy development rights on that land, et cetera, et cetera. So conservation planning is good for everybody. It's good for developers, good for conservationists, good for local government, good for citizens, et cetera. All right, I already said that. All right, let's talk about a couple of other quick things. Let's talk about downtowns. I have a daughter who lives in Frederick on Magnolia Avenue across the street from Hood College. I love to go into downtown Frederick and walk around. The kids go to Parkway Elementary School, my grandchildren. And you know, that's a great example of a town that's really turned around. It used to be in the early 1980s, downtown Frederick was nothing compared to what it is today. But think if you had the same kind of vitality in downtown Thurmont, and downtown Brunswick, and downtown Emmitsburg. You know, that's an opportunity that actually people are looking for all over the country. Let's talk about economic development in downtown. This is a magazine for industrial park developers in the South. The headline says, when site searching the South, make sure you inspect the community's downtown first. So why in the world would an industrial park developer who's not going to put his business in the downtown care about a downtown?
The workers?
And well, the reason is because downtowns are the heart and soul of every place. If you don't have a healthy downtown, you simply don't have a healthy town. And what we've learned in America is it's hard to be a suburb of nothing. Right? And so I'm happy to report that downtowns are coming back to life all over America. This is a new survey by Cushman & Wakefield and Smart Growth America that documents 500 major American companies that have moved from suburban office parks back into downtown in the past 5 years. Companies like McDonald's and Quicken Loans and Marriott and General Electric, and I could go on and on and on. And why did they move? Number one on the list, to attract and retain talented workers. To attract and retain talented workers. So here's an example. So this is Amazon's first headquarters in Seattle, but it used to, and it's right in downtown. It's in all those buildings you see there. It used to be all over the suburbs. It used to be one way to get to work at Amazon. It was called drive your car. Now you can still drive to work if you want at Amazon if you want to, but you could also take the ferry, you could take a train, you could take a bus, you could ride your bike, or you could walk. And at the end of the day, all these thousands of workers are right in the middle of all the action. Okay? And why did they choose Washington, D.C. and New York for the headquarters too? Because we have the most highly educated workforce in America. They were right next to an international airport. We got a working mass transit system. It's a walkable neighborhood, and they're transforming Crystal City to even better now. But that's what's going on all over the country. So here's Durham, North Carolina. So what did they have? Well, they had abandoned tobacco warehouses and vacant parking lots. And they said, well, hey, maybe we could do something with that. And guess what? They've restored all those warehouses and put those parking lots back into productive use. I'll talk later on tonight about how one of the greatest redevelopment opportunities anywhere in America is all these underperforming parking lots that we have. You know, Joni Mitchell used to say, you know, tear up paradise and put in a parking lot, but now we can tear up those parking lots and put paradise back. And if you want to turn a NIMBY into a YIMBY, that's how you do it. All right, let's talk about Rockville. You know, this is our county seat, and we thought it was a great idea back in the 1970s to tear down the entire downtown, basically, replace it with this lovely mall, which we now, guess what, we tore the mall down, put the downtown back. It's kind of a metaphor for America, right? It's like, what were we thinking when we tore down our downtown? It was so important that we now are putting downtowns back all over America. And all right, so let's talk about this for a second. Let's talk about how we arrange development. All right, a lot of different ways to arrange development. We had a model for development in America for about 400 years. We called it a town. And towns always had a few things in common. They had an edge and a center. You knew where the town ended and the countryside began. They were walkable and pedestrian friendly, architecturally coherent and interesting. They had a mix of uses and housing types. And, you know, they had a strong sense of community and a wonderful sense of place. And starting about 1960, we just forgot all of that. We came up with a new model. And in this new model, we segregated all the uses. You couldn't walk anywhere for anything. It was architecturally chaotic and ugly. It was very hard to have a sense of community, and you had no sense of place whatsoever. And so the question that many of us have been asking is, do we have any alternatives to that might be more attractive, more efficient, more profitable? And the answer is, of course we do. We have lots of alternatives, and I'm going to just show you a few of them. So let's talk about, you know, low impact development for a second. So, you know, green space. So let me just show you two streets. I'm going to ask you three questions. Okay, here's two new subdivision streets, okay? The first street, the street is 24 feet wide from curb to curb. Second street is 40 feet wide from curb to curb. Okay. So what happens when you add 16 feet of pavement to the width of the street in the subdivision? First of all, you have just increased the cost of every house on that street by at least $9,000 a house. Because the streets are the most expensive part of the development process. So less asphalt means more affordable housing. But it also means less soil erosion, less sedimentation, less non-point sources of pollution running off into our river and streams. Now, so that's so interesting because we're fighting. The developers come in and they want to have like flexibility in street standards, and people act like you kind of get something over on them, like you're nuts. But I suppose the local environmental group came in with the developer and said, oh, it's good for the environment and good for development. And oh, by the way, which one of those streets is safer for children? The wider the streets are, the faster the cars go, right? So this is what sustainable development is all about. Good for business, good for the environment, good for the community. Less asphalt, good for all of those things. All right, let's talk about traditional neighborhood development. Andreas Dewani, I don't know if you've ever seen him talk or anything. He's mostly full of himself, but he's a brilliant genius man who's going to go down in history because he had an incredible idea. And his idea was that the small towns of America were not just charming anachronisms. They were a model for how we could build in the future. People made fun of Andreas Dewani when he designed Seaside, Florida. Do you know that is the most highly appreciated real estate in the history of Florida? That they've gone because people will pay almost anything to live in a place that's walkable and charming. So, let's think about this. Let's think about the Washington metropolitan area for a second. What are the three most high-value neighborhoods in the Washington metropolitan area? I'll tell you what they are. Old Town Alexandria, Georgetown, and Chevy Chase. Okay? So think about Alexandria, for example. Most of the houses are 150 to 200 years old. They all cost at least $1.5 million. Why are people paying $1.5 million for a house in Old Town? Is that because they want to do home repair? No. Because it's charming. It's walkable. We're not making any more of those kind of neighborhoods. And because there's a supply-demand imbalance is why we pay so much for those kind of neighborhoods. You go to Europe, every neighborhood's like that. So you don't have those price differentials because there's not a supply-demand imbalance, because we have walkable, mixed-use, charming neighborhoods everywhere. So why can't we build some more charming, mixed-use neighborhoods? All right, so we have plenty of this. And you have plenty of this. This is where all people in Montgomery County. You know what's happening? Here's what's happening with housing. So did you know that D.C. has built 62,000 apartment units since the recession? 62,000. You know how many are 3 bedrooms or larger? 521. And do you know that the average size of apartments and condos has been going down, down, down for years? So we have 2 choices. A tiny apartment nobody can raise a family in, or a 5 or 6 bedroom McMansion in Frederick County. What about the missing middle? What about all those things in between there that we used to build in America and that we need to build again? Things like small lot housing and duplexes and housing above retail and cottage communities and senior housing and multifamily housing, and that can go on and on. Once again, think about how value is created. It's not created by the size of the lot, it's created by the character of the neighborhood, This is what we do at ULI, is we collect, there's zillions of studies that show that walkable and mixed-use neighborhoods command a premium because we don't have enough of them, and that there has this supply-demand imbalance. All right, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the vernacular. You have some of those beautiful vernacular buildings in America here in Frederick County, and certainly in the Mid-Atlantic. We always built these beautiful buildings, and then we just started forgetting completely about it. We started building townhouses for cars. Okay? What would you rather have? A front garage or a front porch? So I live in Tacoma Park, right? And we have a historic district. We started, 45 years ago. And we don't have all the tear downs that we're having in like Chevy Chase and things like that. And I'll never forget when we started getting, Tacoma Park used to be inexpensive and funky. Now it's expensive and funky. And we had these developers come in, and they were going to buy up every vacant lot in town, and they did that. And I'll never forget it. One of our first houses was a giant house with a big garage sticking out front. And so the Historic District Commission said, no, you can't do that. You have to put the garage in the back, a detached garage. And the developer said to us, well, nobody will buy the house if it doesn't have an attached garage. And I said, well, I was the chairman of the Historic District Commission in Tacoma Park. I said, well, who's buying the rest of the houses in town? We have 3,000 houses in our historic district, and not a single one had an attached garage. Because there was no such thing in America until after 1950. And every house in our historic district dates from 1883 to 1940. Okay? I said, who's buying the rest of these houses? He goes, oh, nobody will buy the house without an attached garage. He said, we'll sue you if you don't let us. I said, sue us. They thought better of it. They built a house with a detached garage. It sold in 2 days. It was like behavior modification. So anyway, that's the kind of thing. So what about cul-de-sac? There's alternatives to everything. Would you rather have asphalt in front of your house or green space in front of your house? It's all about how you arrange the development. You have choices when it comes to everything you do. So conservation development, does it make more sense to take a 100-acre farm and divide up the entire thing into house lots and streets? Or does it make more sense to put the houses in a little portion of the farm and then put the rest of it in agriculture? And did you know that one of the fastest growing forms of housing in America is now called agri-hoods? Building housing developments around working farms. And when you do that, you actually save land, you increase value, you reduce infrastructure because your streets are shorter, your pipe runs are shorter, etc., etc. And it puts children into nature. All right, let's talk about commercial development. So this is what I'll never forget when I first moved to D.C. to go to law school many years ago. So we only had 2 grocery stores, full-service grocery stores in D.C., and they were both Safeways. We called one the Soviet Safeway because it didn't have any food. You had to wait in line for what little there was. The other one was over in Georgetown. We called that the Social Safeway because of the hot dating scene that occurs there. You know how many full-service grocery stores there are in the district now? 44. And do you know how many of those have a parking lot in front of them? None. You know so where's the parking? Well, it's either on the roof, it's behind the building, it's under the building, on top of the building, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what the new grocery stores look like there on the right. So here's the old retail model. You know, you got the so-called golden mile here in Frederick. But let me tell you, that's retail for the last century. For the last century. Strip retail is for the last century. The future belongs to mixed use and town centers and downtowns and main streets, et cetera, et cetera. Why is that? Well, let's start off with e-commerce. Because so many people are shopping online today, every so-called big box store in America is getting littler. They're getting littler. And the retail industry is throwing out all the old rules. Everything they used to say they couldn't do, they will now do if you tell them to. And by the way, we were building before the recession retail space in America 5 times faster than retail sales? And that we had retail space 4 times more than per person than any other country in the world? And so we simply overbuilt out on the highway. And the one place with more spending power than stores is in our cities and in our downtowns. And I'll show you some examples of what happened. So this is what we were doing for years, of course. We were building retail space faster than sales. But here's how consumer attitudes have changed. And this is a front page article from USA Today, which is about the fact that the average amount of time that Americans spend at a strip shopping center or a mall has been going down for years. People just go to buy what they want and they leave. Right? They don't go to a strip mall to hang out, But let me show you some places they might go to and hang out. And by the way, there's a great website called deadmalls.com. It has an interactive map of the United States. You just hit on any state, you get a list of all the dead malls, like Frederick County Mall, or it's interesting. So when they tore down the Rockville Mall, part of what did in Rockville Mall was White Flint Mall, right? But Rockville Mall is now gone, and White Flint Mall is gone. And of the 10 regional malls that were in D.C. when I moved there, how many are left? 2. Okay? That's how the world is changing. And, Ellen Dunham Jones, who teaches at Georgia Tech, likes to say that the biggest retail trend of the next generation is to be the conversion of dead or dying strip malls into walkable places. And so, let me show you Storrs, Connecticut. That's the home of the University of Connecticut. The Connecticut Storrs wasn't even a town. It was just a bunch of strip malls. What kind of student wants to go to a school in a town with a bunch of strip malls and nothing else, right? So here's what they have now. They've built themselves a downtown in Storrs, Connecticut. Anybody been to College Park lately? See what they're doing in College Park? Completely transforming what used to be just the most hideous strip you've seen in Maryland into a real place. Did you know their Target is in a 7-story building now? Their Target. With 5 floors of student housing above the Target, sitting right on the sidewalk. All right, so this is the new promised land. You have plenty of opportunities to put lots of development in these places. And the places that people say the kind of development they tell you they don't want, like multifamily housing, this is where you put it, because there are no neighbors here. Right? So, it's large, it's flat, it's it's already got infrastructure, it can go on and on. Okay, so here's what's happening. So there's your typical Best Buy, spread out, single-use drive-over. Let me show you another new Best Buy. There's one. Okay, people are actually sleeping upstairs and shopping downstairs. You say, I don't want to do that. Well, there are a lot of people who might, like some of the 75% of American households who have no school-age children. People like me, empty nesters, retirees, unrelated singles, etc., etc. You say, well, I couldn't do that in a small town like, Thurmont. Well, maybe you could do that in Thurmont. What's that? That's a new Dairy Queen with a dentist office upstairs. How appropriate. And by the way, who'd you rather live next door to anyway? A house full of out-of-control teenagers or a dentist's office? I mean, which one's going to have more impact on your quiet enjoyment of your house? So, point is, everything that the retail industry used to say they wouldn't do, they're doing all over the country now. But once again, only in communities that say, I want something better. I don't want your off-the-shelf kind of stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So, we do these tours around the country. We train developers, and about 3 years ago, we went down to Bentonville, Arkansas, and we took a tour of Bentonville and Fayetteville. And we saw this Waffle House. We were driving down the highway for the interstate from Bentonville to Fayetteville. We passed this Waffle House, the one on the left. I didn't pay any attention to that because, you've seen Waffle Houses like that all over the country, right? And then we get into downtown Fayetteville, and there's another Waffle House, a brand new building with 3 floors of housing above the Waffle House. I thought, that's kind of interesting. I've never seen a Waffle House in a mixed-use building in a downtown before. So I said, I wonder if the city knows anything about this. And of course, the city had already done a study about this. And it turns out that the downtown Waffle House was outperforming the one out on this highway. But more importantly, and this is the point, the downtown Waffle House was producing far more taxes per acre, more jobs per acre, more residents per acre. There were 42 people living upstairs above the Waffle House in downtown Fayetteville. Nobody lives in the Waffle House out on the highway. And by the way, if you're eating a lot of waffles, you probably need to walk after you go to the Waffle House. And this is why the future belongs to mixed use, not because it's easier to do, but because it's outperforming single-use development everywhere in the country. And we have this slogan in the real estate industry. It's called the place-making dividend. It simply means people stay longer, come back more often, and spend more money in places that attract their affection. And people do love places like downtown Frederick because they're lovable places. We need to create more of those kind of places. All right, let's talk about big box for a second, like Walmart. You've all seen these. They used to talk about, I remember when Walmart first said, we don't no longer have to build the gray-blue battleship box. How many of you guys have seen the new Walmarts in D.C.? All right, here's the first one. That's right next to Gonzaga High School. That's a brand new building. 5 stories of apartments above the Walmart. There's a swimming pool on the roof. There are actually real windows that let in real sunlight onto the wall, onto the floor of the Walmart. Where's the parking? It's under the building. And by the way, they don't need as much parking as they used to need. You know why? You know how often, like, the average millennial male goes to the grocery store? 3 times a week. Go to buy what they're going to eat for dinner for that night. And there's a transit stop a block away from this, by the way. Did you know that the first big box store in Washington, D.C. was Target on 14th Street in the Columbia Heights neighborhood? They came in 2008. They demanded that they would not come unless the city built them a 1,000-car parking garage. And the city did it. Cost $40 million for taxpayers. Structured parking, you should know this, structured parking costs $30,000 to $50,000 a space. Okay, $30,000 to $50,000 per space. Okay, so guess what? The Washington Post did a study last year and found that in the 10 years that Target has been open, that never once on any day, not even between Christmas and Thanksgiving or whatever, there was never more than 402 cars in that parking lot ever. And so guess what? They closed an entire level of the parking garage and have now put retail space in there. But they didn't understand the urban market. They didn't understand. Do you know there's a new Target in downtown Roslyn? In Arlington, you know how much parking it has? 0. 0. You know how many people work in downtown Roslyn? Like 100,000 people who can all walk to that Target and then walk home. So the world is changing. All right, that's the second Walmart in Washington, D.C. Okay, here's the third one. That's on Georgia Avenue, right in Tacoma. Okay, that's on the site of a 4-acre used car lot. Where's the parking? Underneath the building. Okay? Don't accept any more of this junk that's coming. Okay? And it's going on all over the country. There's a Target in Minneapolis. There's one in Stamford, Connecticut. There's one in Chapel Hill. All right, let's talk about infill development. Every small town in Maryland has got these missing teeth. And mostly they're missing because we tore buildings down to put parking there. And parking is important. Don't get me wrong. Parking is important. You always, we still need places to park. But if there's nothing to park for, then why would you want to go there? And one of the things we found is that communities that have parking problems are successful communities. Because it's a place that people want to be. And that's one of the things that Montgomery County has done really smart is, like in Bethesda, which by the way has 200 restaurants in 1 square mile, all the parking is public parking in decks or underground. There's no private parking lots. The land's too valuable to have surface parking, for example. So let me just show you some small town projects. Okay, here's a Dollar General on an empty lot in Bennington, Vermont, a new CVS in Davidson, North Carolina, Hampton Inn in downtown Fairhope, Alabama, or senior housing in Madison, Georgia. And that's the kind of thing that a town like Thurmont or Emmitsburg should be looking for. Here's some others. That was that Dairy Queen I showed you was in Herndon. That's a Sykesville, Maryland. It's got a beautiful new infill project, etc. So those are the kind of things you can do. All right, this I wanted to say a couple more words about this. Historic preservation. I'm the chairman of the board of the National Main Street Center, so I'm kind of interested in historic buildings. And historic buildings is oftentimes our greatest asset, but one of our most unappreciated assets. Historic building stock has both psychological value and economic value. Some of you probably read some of Thomas Wolfe's famous novels, like Look Homeward, Angel. He's the guy who penned the immortal line, "You can't go home again," right? Well, sadly, Tom Wolfe, he can't go home again because here's his site of his original house in Asheville, North Carolina. Why is historic preservation important in places like Frederick? Because a city or town without a past is like a man without a memory. As Daniel Webster once wrote, he said, quote, "The man who feels no sentiment or veneration for the memory of his forefathers is himself unworthy of kindred regard and remembrance." Saving the historic buildings of Maryland is about saving the heart and soul of Maryland. But it's also incredibly important to our economic well-being as well. So let me show you a couple of Main Street communities. This is a little town out in Wisconsin. This used to be their fire station, and a guy called it turned into a pizza parlor. And like so many towns, this was a town going downhill until they brought in Main Street. And they started working with them to, among other things, restore the facades of their buildings. Tells the story of the history of the building. But guess what? Sales of pizza almost doubled to sustain that over a multi-year period. And so there are all these different reasons why preservation is good for business, jobs, property values, tourism, et cetera, et cetera. So, these are some of the figures. For every $1 invested in Main Street in America by public, like by the state of government, Maryland, for example, we have leveraged $26 in private investment. That's a pretty good return on investment. That's a return as if return on investment really matters. All right, so we do let's talk about tourism. Arthur Frommer kind of summed it up pretty well. He said, among cities and towns with no particular recreational appeal, those that preserve their past continue to enjoy tourism. Those that haven't receive almost no tourism at all. Tourists simply won't go to a city or town that has lost its soul. But once again, saving the soul of a place is kind of important to its economic well-being as well. So, at the Urban Land Institute, we do an annual report called Emerging Trends in Real Estate. We do this every year. We interview about 4,000 investors, developers, government officials all over the country, and we find out what are the best things to invest in, etc. 2016, we found, quote, office space in rehabilitated industrial buildings was demanding higher rents than new Class A office space. Okay? So let me show you an example. So here's a typical Class A office building. That happens to be in Montgomery County, right? But guess what? That building has higher rents, faster lease up, lower turnover than that building. Okay? And why is that? Because particularly creative class employers and employees like space with character. And these old industrial buildings have big floor plates. It's easy to move things around. And these companies like flexibility in the way they do things. So you're seeing this all over the country. So, the new Converse World Headquarters is in this old wharf in Boston, and the Starbucks is in the old Sears Distribution Center. That's their world headquarters. Or how about Under Armour in Baltimore, the old Tide detergent plant? Or how about the vacant post office is now where Walgreens is moving their world headquarters? Or how about this abandoned power plant in Toledo, which is now the headquarters for a medical company? Or how about right here in Maryland? So they take this abandoned factory out in Cumberland and turn it into apartments and a restaurant and a brewery. And you got opportunities like this all over the place. And how about hotels? I went to Indiana 2 years ago to give a speech for the Indiana Preservation Group, and it was in a small city called Richmond, about the same size as Frederick, and there was no downtown hotel. So they put me up in the Hampton Inn, which is on the highway outside of town, and the only thing I could walk to was the Jiffy Lube, right? And that's where we put all our hotels for 40 years, out on the highway. But I want to tell you, Marriott did a survey and asked young people what they thought was more important, comfortable and predictable or authentic and interesting in lodging facilities. And by huge majorities, they said authentic and interesting were more important than comfortable and predictable. And they said they wanted to be in a downtown. They didn't want to be out on the highway. And so I'm proud to say that once again, we are taking these old things like the abandoned brewery in Milwaukee and turning it into a hotel. Or how about the abandoned state mental hospital in New York and Buffalo, where we replace the patient rooms with guest rooms? Or how about the former Bexar County Jail in San Antonio, which is now a Holiday Inn? Or the abandoned John Deere factory in Waterloo, Iowa, that's been turned into a courtyard by Marriott. Or how about go up to Lancaster? 2 hotels in old factories in Lancaster now, including the Pork Factory Hotel. Or the silk mill in Petaluma, California, that's a Hampton. And I could show you hundreds of examples, but I want to just get you to think about this. I think probably most of you in this room are in favor of preserving the best of Frederick's past. But I want to ask you this question. What are you building today that your children will fight to save 50 years from now? And I ask that question for a couple of reasons. First, because 80% of everything ever constructed in America has been built since 1950, and a lot of it is just plain junk. Like this Kentucky Fried Chicken franchise that replaced the house like the one you see in the background there. It's also important because, as Winston Churchill once wrote, he said, quote, "We shape our buildings and then our buildings shape us." Right? So, what you need to ask yourself is, can we get new construction, particularly commercial construction, that enhances community character? So here's a question. Should new development shape the character of the county going forward, or should the character of the county shape the new development? And how you answer that question will determine what this county looks like 25 years from now. And what you need to know is you have a choice. Every chain store and every franchise in America has Plan A, Plan B, and Plan C. And what gets built depends on you. I was in Utah last week giving a talk similar to this one. And, I said to the folks in Utah, southern Utah, a small town called Cedar City, I said, how would you like it if the federal government came into town and told you what your town was going to look like? It'd be like, get the guns, we're going to fight. But they let these multinational corporations come in and tell them what the town is going to look like. They don't have to accept that. And let me show you what I'm talking about. So here's a typical Plan A Walgreens, right? Or it could be a CVS, or it could be a Rite Aid, or it could be a McDonald's, or whatever. Okay? Try a little harder to get Plan B. Try a little harder to get Plan C. And by the way, every Plan C is different because every place is different. So there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. By the way, that's a brand new, all these buildings are brand new buildings, by the way. They're not, that's in Baldwin Park, Florida. Here's in Buckeye, Arizona. Here's the CVS in Davidson, North Carolina. Here's one in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, just opened. Because Lancaster's thinking about the value of design and good design. About that, that's a Rite Aid in a new building in Camden, Maine. And why does it look like it's in New England? Because it's in New England. They said we want it to fit with our town. All right, so this is what you have parts of this county look like, right? And we talked about the Golden Mile or the 85 area with coming up from Rockville, etc. But let me show you what you can do if it is never too late to start. Communities deteriorate one building and one project at a time. And that's how they get better. One building and one project at a time. George H.W. Bush, the first Bush, he was a tree guy. And he had a great slogan about trees. And he said, the best time in America to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is tomorrow. And that's the way you got to think about development as well. So let me show you what Fort Collins, Colorado looks like today. It used to look like that first slide. And this is what their commercial corridors look like today. Because they started 20 years ago. It took them, you wouldn't see a change overnight, but slowly, building by building by building, you can change a place. So here's, typical, 7-Eleven. People won't walk across the front of a building like this, and also you have a little more traffic edge. Let me show you another 7-Eleven. This is on Wisconsin Avenue in Bethesda, right? They have a form-based code here, and basically where is the parking? The parking is here, back here. The cars exit on the side street. They limited the number of curb cuts, so there's fewer accidents, and people can both drive and walk to that 7-Eleven. Okay, and that's, so let me show you a bigger example. So here's your Lowe's or your Home Depot or whatever. Here's another one. This is the way all new commercial buildings in Charlotte, North Carolina look today. They just simply have a build to line instead of a setback from line. That's all you do. You just say, come up to the sidewalk. Put the cars in the middle of the block, not out on the front of the block. All right, one word about, big box versus small business. You spend $1 in Walmart, most of that's going to end up in Bentonville, Arkansas. You spend $1 in a locally owned business, most of it will end up here in Frederick County at a rate 3 times what you would if it was spent in a chain store. So that's just a plug for local business, and there's lots of reasons why small business can make a big difference. All right, I'm going to end by just saying a few words about what I call my secrets of successful communities. I've learned a lot in the 40 years that I've been doing this. And first, I learned successful communities always have a vision for the future. Some people might call that a plan. And growing up in Alabama, I can tell you there's lots of people who will tell you they're against planning. I'm sure there are people in this county tell you they're against planning. But I always say to them, well, then tell me the name of any successful organization, institution, corporation, or community that doesn't plan for the future. Failing to plan simply means planning to fail. As the book of Proverbs says, without vision, the people will perish. Try to imagine a corporation that didn't have a business plan. They would have a very hard time getting investors, right? The same thing with a community. You got to think about the blueprint for where you're going. And those blueprints always begin by inventorying your assets. Whether it's a land use plan, a tourism plan, an economic development plan, what have you got? What have you already got? You have the Catoctin Mountains, you have Hood College, you have Mount St. Mary's College, you have the Monocacy River, you have beautiful historic downtowns. Those are assets. How do you build on those assets? Successful communities build all their plans around the enhancement of what they already have. They also use education, incentives, partnerships, and voluntary initiatives, not just regulation. Now don't get me wrong, I didn't say I'm against regulation. It prevents bad things from happening. Sets a minimum standard of conduct, protects public health and safety. But you need to try to figure out how to use carrots, not just sticks. 2 weeks ago, I was in North Dakota. I heard about a really interesting incentive I'd never heard of before. Fargo, North Dakota, cuts liquor license prices in half for downtown restaurants as opposed to restaurants on the highway. That's an incentive. Think about all the ways that you could encourage development where you want it and discourage it where you don't want it. All right, pick and choose. All development is not created equal. The biggest impediment to better development in small town and rural America is a fear of saying no to anything. If you're afraid to say no to anything, you will always get the worst of everything. Communities that set low standards or no standards have simply compete to the bottom. Communities that set high standards compete to the top. Because they've learned if you say no to bad development, you'll always get better development in its place. Successful communities consider what they look like. Successful communities cooperate with their neighbors for mutual benefit, the county and the city. Stop fighting, start working together, that kind of stuff. All right, let me show you. Here's the one city that somebody growing up in Birmingham, Alabama used to make fun of, Chattanooga, Tennessee. It was known as the most polluted city in America, routinely referred to as a patch of rust in the Sun Belt. But nobody makes fun of Chattanooga anymore. Today it's known as an international model for community revitalization. And it began with a focus on 2 things, the Tennessee River, because that was their most important natural asset, and downtown Chattanooga, because that was their heart and soul of the community. And because they had a plan, they were able to do some pretty remarkable things. That's the Walnut Street Bridge. That's an obsolete highway bridge across the Tennessee River. Tennessee DOT had set aside millions of dollars for its demolition. Chattanooga said, we've got a better idea. Let us use the same amount of money to turn it into the nation's longest pedestrian bridge. Now connects one side of the Tennessee River with the other. And it's revitalized neighborhoods on both sides. How about Susan City, California? That's their city hall, it used to be, in 2 double-wide trailers. This was the only city hall in California had to register the Department of Motor Vehicles. And I'm bringing this up because, public buildings used to always be our most beautiful buildings. Whether it was the library, the public school, the courthouse, and they were always in our towns. And then we decided, starting once again in about 1960, that cheaper was better. And you know what we've learned from that experience? We've learned that cheaper is simply cheaper. And you know what they said in Susan City, California? They said, why would anybody invest in a community that wouldn't invest in itself? So they built a new city hall right on that same spot. And that began the turnaround in that community from being voted the worst place to live in Northern California to one of the best in 20 years. But it all started with an investment in themselves. Successful communities inventory their assets, natural, cultural, human, economic, etc. Sometimes the assets are pretty obvious. Welcome to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Teton County, Wyoming. But they didn't just, it's obvious what they've got. World-class scenery and unparalleled wildlife resources. But did you know that Teton County, Wyoming has banned billboards? They don't have any signs higher than monument-style signs because they did that to protect that world-class scenery. They mapped all the wildlife migration corridors. So the elk kept migrating there because the biggest tourist attraction in the winter is the elk herd. 10,000 elk right on the edge of downtown Jackson. One of the great spectacles in North America. How about Annapolis? What do they got? They got this incredible architectural legacy. Sometimes the assets of the community are not very obvious. Welcome to Lowell, Massachusetts. 1975 was a dying industrial city, had an unemployment rate of 28%. Thought it had no assets. But what it had was abandoned textile mills and had a vision for how to reuse those mills. Today, this is the Charleston, South Carolina of New England. This is one of the legacy cities that has done a remarkable turnaround. Or how about an example like this, the Torpedo Factory in Alexandria, now attracting 4 million visitors a year. It's the biggest working arts center in the eastern United States. Or how about Columbus, Georgia? Had this terrible flood along the Chattahoochee River, and they realized that adversity could breed opportunity. And they said, when we build back, we want to build back better. So they built one of the great river walks, and it began the revitalization of their downtown, just the way Carroll Creek did with downtown Frederick. Or how about Paducah, that turned their flood walls into art galleries? Or how about Akron, Ohio, where the Quaker Oats Company used to be headquartered? Instead of tearing down their grain elevators, they turned it into a Hilton Hotel. And the beginning of their turnaround in downtown, part of the Quaker Oats redevelopment. Or how about this abandoned rail yard in Tacoma, Washington, now the heart of the campus, the new campus of the University of Washington at Tacoma, which is in all those old warehouse buildings you see there. Or how about in Poughkeepsie, New York? You've heard of the High Line in New York City? Yeah. Let me show you a small town version of the High Line. This is the highest bridge over the Hudson River, 274 feet high in probably the most troubled city in the Hudson River Valley. But they turned that bridge into a state park, now attracting 800,000 visitors a year. So, successful communities use education, incentives, partnerships. Why do we educate? In order to reduce the need to regulate. Why do we educate? Because people won't embrace what they don't understand. Why do we educate? Because you, all of you, and the people who aren't here tonight have a choice about how they grow. But you need to know what the choices are. Successful communities use incentives, as I've already said. It's a lot more than free Cokes. There's all kinds of things you could use as an incentive to get more development in the places you want it and less when you don't want it. Here's an example. So this used to be the abandoned Lone Star Brewery in San Antonio. It sat abandoned until they used a historic preservation tax credit to turn it into one of the greatest museums in America, the San Antonio Museum of Art, which has the single largest Latin American collection in this country, by the way, if you've never been there. Or let me show you another. How about voluntary initiatives? You can start planting trees up and down Route 15 tomorrow if you wanted to. Or conservation easements. That doesn't require anything but a voluntary initiative. Well, let's go up to Gettysburg. How about a partnership? Did you know that there were no wires running through the battlefield in 1863? Well, guess what? They're all gone now. Because of a partnership between the state of Pennsylvania, Adams County, the borough of Gettysburg, the Ted Turner Foundation, the National Park Service, etc. And they restored that. They tore down that sightseeing tower. I helped buy when I worked for the Conservation Fund. We bought a Burger King and a motel right in the middle of the battlefield. Tore it down, restored the battlefield. It's never too late. Yazoo City. I love Yazoo City, Mississippi, because I have this friend who went to Ireland. You heard about this program called the Tidy Town program. And on the Tidy Town program, all they did was pass out paint. I went to Ireland the first time in 1982. My wife's relatives are all from Ireland. Her father was born over there. And all the houses were just gray, because it was, they were really economically challenged. You go there today, it looks like rainbow sherbet. And you know why? Because they just passed out free paint. And somebody heard about that in Yazoo City, and they painted their way back to vitality by simply passing out free paint to all the business owners in downtown. Successful communities pick and choose. Development is not all created equal. Hagerstown could have put the University of Maryland out on the highway. That was their first choice, right? They would have sucked more life out of Hagerstown, right? Instead, they put it downtown. It's been the one thing that has really helped transform downtown Hagerstown. You've got thousands of students going to school in downtown. And by the way, if you were a young person, where'd you rather go to school anyway? In a cornfield or in a downtown? All right, successful communities like Lexington made a choice, so that's the way their streets all used to look. But they said, no, we're not going to do that anymore. And they just started, one by one, to change the future. You know, leadership is important, but oftentimes it's unappreciated. I love this quote from Monty Python. I don't know if you guys can read this. It says, apart from sanitation, medicine, education, wine, public order, roads, irrigation, public health, and a fresh water system, what have the Romans ever done for us? And oftentimes we feel that way, but if you don't care who gets the credit, you can get an awful lot done in America, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I just want to end by saying this one thing. You know, it doesn't take a lot of people to change a place for the better. And I understand it's not always easy, particularly in small towns and rural areas. This is a picture I took in Buena Vista, Virginia. Does this kind of sum up life in most places? You know, home of 6,000 and 2 happy citizens and 3 old grouches. And I can tell you that no matter what you would propose to do in Frederick County, there are going to be people who will tell you can't do it, won't work, costs too much, tried it already, blah, blah, blah. Okay? And no is a powerful word in America. I agree. But I want to tell you a more powerful word, yes. Yes, we can make Frederick County a better place to live in, to look at, to work in, to visit. A pessimist sees difficulty in every opportunity, but an optimist sees opportunity in every difficulty. Ladies and gentlemen, a vision counts, but implementation is priceless. Thank you so much for coming.